Welcome to Historical Legacies. Here, we dive into history's most intriguing stories, unraveling mysteries, and uncovering truths from the past. Subscribe to join our journey through time's greatest moments. Let's start with a brief introduction. Orwell Unveiled. A Voice Against Tyranny explores the life and legacy of George Orwell, a writer whose words pierce through oppression and deceit. From his formative years to his iconic works, this documentary delves into how his experiences shaped his commitment to truth, freedom, and justice in an age of turmoil. Part 1. The Birth of Eric Arthur Blair, 1903. Eric Arthur Blair, later known by his pen name George Orwell, was born on June 25, 1903, in Motihari, Bengal, a region then under British rule in India. The Blairs were part of what was referred to as the lower upper middle class, a social tier reflective of modest financial stability juxtaposed against a prestigious imperial connection. His father, Richard Walmsley Blair, worked as a subordinate in the opium department of the Indian Civil Service, overseeing the cultivation and trade of opium, a contentious commodity central to British colonial interests. This aspect of his family background exposed Orwell to the machinery of empire from an early age, planting seeds of his later critiques of imperialism. His mother, Ida Mabel Blair, played a pivotal role in his upbringing, encouraging cultural exposure and fostering an early appreciation for literature and storytelling. The environment of British colonial India was both physically and socially stratified, with a rigid division between the ruling British elite and the Indian population they governed. This disparity, though not yet fully understood by the young Eric, left subtle impressions that would later emerge in his works. At the age of 1, his family returned to England, settling in Henley-on-Thames. The relocation marked a significant cultural shift, and although it distanced him from the immediate colonial experience, the influence of empire lingered in his family's worldview. Eric's childhood was marked by isolation and introspection, traits that defined much of his personality and later informed his writing. Despite being a bright child, he was perceived as somewhat aloof and preferred solitary activities like reading and observing the world around him. Books became a refuge, and by the age of 5, Eric had already developed a fascination with language and narrative. This early literary curiosity foreshadowed his eventual career as one of the most incisive writers of the 20th century. His mother's efforts to expose him to culture and education played a key role in shaping his intellectual foundation. The transition to formal education began with Orwell attending a small preparatory school in England. Here, he encountered the strict hierarchies and inequalities embedded within the British educational system, experiences that he later recounted in essays such as Such Were the Joys. These formative years were not without struggle, as he grappled with bullying, financial disparities among his peers, and the weight of high expectations. The financial sacrifices made by his family to ensure his schooling underscored importance they placed on his success, but they also instilled in Orwell a deep awareness of class divisions. Though much of Orwell's childhood unfolded far from the dramatic scenes of his later life, this period was crucial in shaping his worldview. The modest yet respectable status of the Blairs, coupled with the pervasive influence of empire, laid the groundwork for Orwell's sharp observations on class, privilege, and power. These early experiences were like unpolished fragments of the themes that would dominate his later works, quietly preparing him to become a voice against tyranny and injustice. The birth of Eric Arthur Blair was not merely the beginning of an individual's life, but the inception of a journey that would leave an indelible mark on literature and society. From his earliest days, he inhabited the margins of privilege and oppression, a position that uniquely equipped him to dissect the mechanics of inequality and exploitation. In these formative years, the seeds of Orwell's legacy were sown, waiting to grow into his towering voice of dissent. Part 2. From England to Eton, 1911 to 1921. In 1911, Eric Arthur Blair's life took a significant turn when he was sent to England to continue his education, leaving behind the comfort of his family home. This relocation marked the beginning of a new phase in his life, exposing him to the structured and hierarchical world of British academia. His parents placed immense importance on his education, viewing it as a stepping stone to upward mobility in a society deeply stratified by class. To afford this, They made considerable financial sacrifices, which added pressure on young Eric to excel academically. His first significant schooling experience came at St. Cyprian's, a preparatory school in Eastbourne. It was here that Orwell encountered the rigid class system embedded within British private education. While the school was known for producing successful candidates for prestigious institutions like Eton and Harrow, its methods were harsh and unforgiving. Orwell later recounted his time at St. Cyprian's in his essay, Such Were the Joys, describing the institution as a place where students were subjected to physical punishment and public humiliation. For a child from a family with limited means, the disparity between wealthier peers and his own circumstances was glaring, fostering his early resentment of class inequalities. Despite the challenges, Eric displayed exceptional academic promise, particularly in English and writing. His talent for observation and articulation became evident in essays and assignments, hinting at the literary prowess he would later wield. Teachers noticed his intellect, though his reserved and introverted nature often made him seem detached from his peers. This sense of being an outsider, combined with his growing awareness of privilege and injustice, began shaping the themes that would define his later works. In 1917, Eric earned a scholarship to Eton College, one of England's most prestigious schools. Eton represented the pinnacle of privilege and tradition, an institution that trained many of Britain's future leaders. However, Orwell's experience there was far from ideal. At Eton, he observed the entrenched hierarchies and the casual entitlement of the aristocratic elite. These experiences sharpened his critical view of class dynamics and further distanced him from the establishment values upheld by such institutions. At Eton, Eric had the opportunity to develop his literary skills under influential teachers, including Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World. Though he was not a particularly diligent student, he stood out for his sharp wit and incisive writing. He contributed to the school's literary magazines, honing his ability to communicate complex ideas with clarity and precision. These years also saw him beginning to question authority and societal norms, a rebellious streak that would later define his political and literary voice. While Eton offered a world of opportunities, it also reinforced Eric's feeling of alienation. He was acutely aware of his financial dependence on scholarships and the unbridgeable gap between himself and wealthier peers. This divide fueled his deep-seated skepticism of privilege and power, perspectives that would become central to his critiques of imperialism and authoritarianism. By the time Eric left Eton in 1921, he had developed a distinct worldview shaped by his observations of privilege, inequality, and the hypocrisies of the British class system. Though he had not yet fully articulated these ideas, they simmered beneath the surface, waiting for the right moments to crystallize into his sharp critiques of society. His time at Eton, while challenging, provided him with the tools and perspectives necessary to navigate and critique the world around him. As he stepped out of the cloistered halls of Eton, Eric faced an uncertain future. Lacking the financial means or connections to pursue a traditional path in British society, he set his sights on something different. This decision marked the end of his academic life and the beginning of his journey into the complexities of the British Empire and beyond. Part 3. Serving the Empire in Burma, 1922 to 1927. After leaving Eton in 1921, Eric Arthur Blair faced the daunting reality of finding his place in the world. Without the financial resources or family connections to pursue university, he opted for a career in the British Imperial Police, securing a post in colonial Burma. This decision was pragmatic, driven by economic necessity rather than passion, but it would prove to be a transformative chapter in his life. Burma, then a province of British India, was a region deeply entrenched in colonial exploitation and resistance. Eric arrived in Burma in 1922, stepping into the role of a colonial officer tasked with maintaining law and order. His duties included enforcing British authority over the local population, a role that placed him in direct conflict with his emerging sense of justice. The daily realities of colonial rule exposed him to the pervasive racism, oppression, and exploitation underpinning the empire. This first-hand experience of imperialism would later fuel some of his most searing critiques of power and domination. Orwell's time in Burma was marked by a growing disillusionment with the colonial system. He saw how the British administration wielded its power to suppress the aspirations and autonomy of the Burmese people. The oppressive machinery of empire, from the punitive legal system to the cultural arrogance of its officers, deeply troubled him. These experiences heightened his awareness of the dehumanizing effects of power, not just on the oppressed, but also on the oppressors themselves. The psychological toll of his role became evident in his reflections on the moral compromises required of him as a colonial officer. In his essay Shooting an Elephant, Orwell recounted a pivotal incident in which he felt compelled to kill a rogue elephant to maintain his authority before the local crowd. The essay captures the internal conflict he experienced, torn between his personal ethics and the expectations of his position. It is a poignant exploration of how the imperial system ensnared both its enforcers and its victims, reducing all involved to mere cogs in a greater machine of control. While in Burma, Eric began to nurture his literary aspirations. He kept journals and wrote letters that reflected his observations and frustrations, though he had yet to fully develop his voice as a writer. These writings reveal a young man grappling with questions of identity, morality, and the nature of power. The oppressive environment of colonial Burma served as a crucible for his evolving worldview, setting the stage for the themes that would dominate his later works. After 5 years of service, Eric could no longer reconcile his role in the empire with his personal convictions. In 1927, he resigned from the British Imperial Police, a decision that marked a decisive break with the system he had come to despise. His departure was both an act of defiance and a declaration of independence, signaling his determination to pursue a different path. It was during this period that he adopted the pen name George Orwell, a decision symbolic of his desire to reinvent himself and distance his writing from his past. Orwell's time in Burma, though fraught with internal conflict, was instrumental in shaping his understanding of power and oppression. The insights he gained during these years would echo throughout his literary career, informing works such as Burmese Days, a scathing critique of colonialism and its moral bankruptcy. This chapter of his life, though often overshadowed by his later achievements, was a foundational experience that laid the groundwork for his role as one of the 20th century's most influential voices against tyranny. The young man who returned to England in 1927 was markedly different from the one who had left. Hardened by the realities of imperial service and awakened to the injustices of the world, Orwell was now ready to channel his experiences into a lifelong mission to confront inequality and defend the oppressed. Part 4. The Struggle as a Writer begins, 1928 to 1932. In 1928, after leaving the British Imperial Police, Eric Arthur Blair began the challenging journey of establishing himself as a writer. Determined to shed his colonial past and forge a new identity, he adopted the pen name George Orwell. This name, inspired by the River Orwell in Suffolk and chosen for its simplicity and English resonance, symbolized his commitment to authenticity and truth. With no stable income or connections in the literary world, Orwell embarked on a period of intense struggle and self-discovery. Orwell moved to Paris in 1928, seeking inspiration in the city's vibrant literary culture. Paris was then a haven for artists and writers, a place where ideas flourished and conventions were challenged. Yet despite its cultural richness, Orwell's life there was marked by poverty and hardship. Living in squalid accommodations and taking on menial jobs, including washing dishes in restaurants, he experienced firsthand the grinding realities of the urban poor. These experiences deeply influenced his worldview and became the foundation for his first published work, Down and Out in Paris and London. In Down and Out in Paris and London, Orwell chronicled his time among society's marginalized, presenting a vivid and unflinching account of poverty. The book, a blend of memoir and social critique, highlighted the struggles of those living on the edges of society. Orwell's ability to humanize these experiences, drawing attention to the systemic issues that perpetuated poverty, set him apart as a writer with a clear social conscience. His decision to write about the poor, rather than from a position of privilege, demonstrated his commitment to amplifying voices that were often ignored. After returning to England in 1929, Orwell continued to immerse himself in the lives of the working class and the unemployed. He wandered through the streets of London, staying in shelters and sleeping rough to better understand the conditions faced by the homeless. This period of self-imposed hardship was not merely an exercise in observation, but an attempt to connect with the struggles of ordinary people on an intimate level. Through this, Orwell developed a profound empathy for those he wrote about, which became a defining feature of his literary voice. Orwell's early attempts to publish his work were met with limited success. Publishers were hesitant to take a chance on an unknown writer, and he faced numerous rejections. Undeterred, Orwell refined his craft, drawing from his own experiences and observations to create narratives that were both personal and universal. His perseverance paid off when Down and Out in Paris and London was finally published in 1933, receiving critical acclaim for its honesty and originality. During this time, Orwell also began writing essays and reviews for various publications, honing his ability to articulate complex social issues. His essays displayed a clarity of thought and an incisive wit that would later become his trademarks. Writing became not just a profession, but a means of expressing his deeply held convictions about justice and inequality. Each piece he wrote was imbued with a sense of purpose, reflecting his belief in the power of words to inspire change. Despite the financial instability and personal challenges he faced during these years, Orwell remained steadfast in his pursuit of truth. His experiences of poverty, both in Paris and London, shaped his understanding of class dynamics and the structural inequalities that perpetuated suffering. This period of struggle, though arduous, was instrumental in transforming Orwell into a writer who could speak with authority and empathy about the lives of the disenfranchised. By 1932, Orwell had begun to establish himself as a writer with a unique voice and perspective. Though he was far from achieving widespread recognition, his early works laid the groundwork for the themes and style that would define his later career. The struggles he endured during this time were not in vain, for they sharpened his insights and solidified his commitment to documenting the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. Orwell's journey as a writer was only beginning, but the foundation he built during these formative years ensured that his voice would eventually resonate far beyond the pages of his books. With each word he wrote, Orwell moved closer to becoming the powerful voice against tyranny and injustice that the world would come to know. Part 5. A Voice Against Injustice. Early Works, 1933 to 1935. By 1933, George Orwell was beginning to establish himself as a writer with a clear and distinctive voice. His debut book, Down and Out in Paris and London, had recently been published, bringing him modest recognition. Published under his newly adopted pen name, the book revealed Orwell's commitment to exposing social injustice and his ability to craft compelling narratives drawn from lived experience. The critical acclaim it received marked a turning point in his career, though the financial rewards were minimal. Orwell's early works reflected his growing concern with inequality, class divisions, and the plight of the marginalized. In 1934, he published his first novel, Burmese Days, a biting critique of British colonialism based on his experiences in Burma. The novel painted a grim portrait of the imperial enterprise, highlighting the moral decay and hypocrisy inherent in colonial rule. Through its protagonist, John Flory, Orwell explored themes of alienation, cultural conflict, and the corruption of power. The book's unflinching portrayal of empire was both a personal catharsis and a broader condemnation of the system he had once served. During this period, Orwell also began to expand his repertoire, contributing essays, reviews, and articles to various publications. His essays demonstrated his talent for incisive observation and his ability to distill complex social issues into clear and accessible prose. In pieces such as A Hanging and Shooting an Elephant, Orwell drew on his time in Burma to explore the psychological and ethical dilemmas of colonialism. These essays combined vivid storytelling with sharp moral critique, earning him recognition as a writer of substance and insight. Despite his growing body of work, Orwell continued to live a modest and often precarious existence. He supplemented his income by working as a teacher, a role that allowed him to maintain a degree of financial independence while continuing to write. Teaching also gave him direct insight into the educational inequalities of the time, further shaping his understanding of class dynamics. This period of his life, though challenging, was marked by a relentless dedication to his craft and a deepening commitment to social commentary. Orwell's early works were not universally embraced, as their themes often challenged prevailing societal norms. Burmese Days, for instance, faced resistance from publishers wary of its controversial content. Yet Orwell remained undeterred, determined to write about the truths he had witnessed, regardless of the discomfort they might cause. His willingness to confront difficult topics head-on became a defining characteristic of his career. In 1935, Orwell published his second novel, A Clergyman's Daughter. While less overtly political than his other works, the novel delved into issues of identity, societal expectations, and personal freedom. Through its protagonist, Dorothy Hare, Orwell explored themes of conformity and rebellion, reflecting his own struggles with societal norms. Though the novel received mixed reviews, it demonstrated Orwell's growing range as a writer and his ability to tackle diverse subjects with depth and sensitivity. These early years were foundational in shaping Orwell's voice as a writer committed to exposing injustice and challenging authority. His works from this period, though not yet widely celebrated, laid the groundwork for the themes that would dominate his later, more famous writings. Each novel, essay, and article was a step toward refining his ability to articulate the complexities of power, inequality, and resistance. As Orwell continued to write, he began to see his role not just as an observer, but as a participant in the struggle against oppression. His early works revealed his belief in the transformative power of literature and its potential to inspire social change. This conviction would guide him throughout his career, influencing both the subjects he chose to write about and the way he approached his craft. By the end of 1935, Orwell had established himself as a writer with a unique perspective and a growing body of work. While he had yet to achieve widespread recognition, his commitment to truth and justice was unwavering. These early works were not just expressions of his personal experiences, but also powerful calls to confront the injustices of the world. Part 6. The Road to Wigan Pier, 1936 to 1937. In 1936, George Orwell took on a significant project that would cement his reputation as a writer deeply engaged with the struggles of ordinary people. Commissioned by the Left Book Club, Orwell was tasked with documenting the living conditions of the working class in northern England. At the time, Britain was grappling with the effects of the Great Depression, and the industrial North was a stark example of economic hardship and social inequality. Orwell eagerly accepted the assignment, seeing it as an opportunity to explore firsthand the realities of poverty and class struggle. Orwell traveled to the industrial towns of Lancashire and Yorkshire, including Wigan, Barnsley, and Sheffield. These areas were marked by high unemployment, poor housing, and the relentless grind of industrial labor. To fully understand the lives of the working class, Orwell immersed himself in their world. He stayed in overcrowded boarding houses, spoke with miners and their families, and observed the harsh conditions of coal mines. The experience was both eye-opening and profoundly affecting. What struck Orwell most was the resilience and dignity of the people he encountered. Despite their dire circumstances, many retained a strong sense of community and pride. At the same time, he was appalled by the systemic neglect that perpetuated their suffering. The housing conditions were particularly shocking, with families crammed into dilapidated homes lacking basic sanitation. Orwell's observations highlighted the stark divide between the wealthy and the poor, underscoring the failures of a society that allowed such inequalities to persist. Orwell's journey through the industrial North culminated in the publication of The Road to Wigan Pier in 1937. The book was divided into two parts, each reflecting a different aspect of his experience and perspective. The first part was a vivid and compassionate account of the lives of the working class, detailing their struggles with housing, employment, and health. Orwell's keen eye for detail and his ability to humanize his subjects made this section both powerful and poignant. The second part of the book took a more critical and polemical tone, examining the broader political and social implications of the conditions he had witnessed. Orwell used this section to critique the failures of socialism, which he felt was often hindered by its intellectual detachment and lack of practical engagement with the working class. He argued that for socialism to succeed, It needed to address not just economic issues, but also the cultural and psychological barriers that prevented its widespread acceptance. The Road to Wigan Pier received mixed reviews upon publication. While many praised Orwell's vivid reportage and social critique, others took issue with his criticisms of socialism and the middle-class intellectuals who supported it. The book sparked debate and controversy, solidifying Orwell's reputation as a writer unafraid to challenge both the establishment and his own ideological allies. The experience of writing The Road to Wigan Pier had a profound impact on Orwell, deepening his commitment to social justice. He recognized that poverty was not merely an economic issue, but a deeply entrenched social problem requiring systemic change. This realization further fueled his determination to use literature as a tool for exposing injustice and advocating for reform. Orwell's journey through the industrial North also reinforced his belief in the importance of empathy and first-hand experience. By immersing himself in the lives of the working class, he gained insights that could not be gleaned from a distance. This approach became a hallmark of his writing, shaping the authenticity and urgency that defined his later works. By the end of 1937, Orwell had emerged as a powerful voice for the disenfranchised and a sharp critic of societal inequality. The Road to Wigan Pier was more than just a book. It was a call to action, urging readers to confront the realities of poverty and demand change. This chapter in Orwell's life marked a pivotal moment in his journey as a writer and thinker, setting the stage for his continued exploration of power, oppression, and resistance. Part 7. Fighting Fascism. The Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1937. In 1936, as Europe descended into the political turmoil that would eventually lead to World War II, George Orwell found himself drawn to the Spanish Civil War. Alarmed by the rise of fascism and the growing threat it posed to democracy, Orwell decided to take a direct role in the conflict. He was motivated by a deep sense of anti-fascist conviction and a desire to fight against the forces of oppression that were spreading across Europe. The war in Spain, a struggle between the democratic Republicans and the fascist nationalists led by Francisco Franco, presented Orwell with an opportunity to put his ideals into action. Orwell traveled to Spain in December 1936, joining a Marxist militia faction known as the POUM, Partido Obrero de Unificación Marxista. The militia was part of the broader anti-fascist effort to defend the Spanish Republic from the growing threat of fascism. Orwell's decision to fight in Spain was deeply personal. It was a chance for him to engage directly in the fight against tyranny and to test his political beliefs in the heat of battle. The experience of fighting on the front lines in Spain was both brutal and disillusioning for Orwell. As an ordinary soldier, he was exposed to the horrors of war and the inefficiencies of the Republican forces. The militias were poorly equipped, and the Republican side was fractured by infighting between various factions, including anarchists, socialists, and communists. Orwell's personal observations of the chaos on the battlefield served to deepen his disillusionment with political idealism that ignored the practical realities of war and revolution. Despite these challenges, Orwell remained committed to the cause, and he wrote about his experiences in his memoir Homage to Catalonia. Published in 1938, the book provided a first-hand account of the Spanish Civil War from a soldier's perspective, focusing on the political and military struggles he witnessed. Orwell's account was candid and critical, highlighting the inefficiencies and infighting that plagued the Republican side, as well as the atrocities committed by both sides of the conflict. His observations were particularly damning of the Soviet-backed communist forces, whose tactics of suppression and manipulation went against the very ideals Orwell was fighting for. Homage to Catalonia was a significant departure from Orwell's earlier works, as it revealed his evolving political views and his growing skepticism towards certain left-wing factions. The book also revealed Orwell's belief in the necessity of individual liberty and the danger of totalitarianism, regardless of its ideological origins. Orwell's experiences in Spain profoundly shaped his understanding of political power and its potential for corruption. This would have a lasting impact on his future works, especially Animal Farm in 1984, where he would critique both fascism and the totalitarian strains of communism. Orwell's time in Spain was marked by both physical and psychological trauma. He was severely wounded by a sniper's bullet, which left him with a lifelong injury. The physical scars were a constant reminder of the war, but the psychological scars were perhaps even more profound. Orwell witnessed firsthand the ways in which political factions could betray their own comrades, eroding the unity necessary for a successful revolution. These experiences deepened his distrust of political ideologies that sought to impose their vision of the world through violence and coercion. After recovering from his wounds, Orwell returned to England in 1937, disillusioned by his experiences in Spain. His time in the war had opened his eyes to the complexities of revolutionary politics, and he now viewed ideological purity with a more critical eye. Despite his disillusionment, Orwell remained committed to fighting fascism, but he would never again embrace political movements without questioning their ultimate goals and methods. The Spanish Civil War left an indelible mark on Orwell, shaping his political outlook and his literary career. It was in Spain that he fully realized the dangers of totalitarianism, whether on the left or the right. This newfound understanding would resonate throughout his later works, making him one of the most incisive critics of authoritarianism in the 20th century. Orwell's experiences in Spain also reinforced his commitment to personal freedom, equality, and the belief that true revolution could not be achieved through violence or coercion. Part 8. The Struggle for Truth, Journalism and Social Critique, 1938 to 1940. After returning from Spain in 1937, George Orwell faced a personal and professional crossroads. His disillusionment with the political left, especially after his experiences in the Spanish Civil War, prompted him to distance himself from any specific ideology. However, his commitment to social justice and his desire to expose injustice remained unwavering. During this period, Orwell began to hone his craft as a journalist, focusing on political and social issues with an even sharper critical eye. One of Orwell's primary concerns during this time was the rise of totalitarianism in Europe. The rise of fascism under Mussolini in Italy and Hitler in Germany had been alarming enough, but Orwell was equally concerned by the growth of Stalinism and the oppressive Soviet regime under Joseph Stalin. His experiences in Spain, where Stalinist factions had betrayed their own comrades, had made him acutely aware of the dangers of authoritarianism in all its forms. As a writer, Orwell sought to expose the manipulations of totalitarian regimes and the failure of intellectuals to confront their growing power. In 1938, Orwell began writing for the Tribune, a left-wing newspaper where he published a series of articles on current events. Through his work at the Tribune, he emerged as a sharp critic of both fascism and Stalinism. His articles covered a wide range of topics, from the Spanish Civil War to the looming threat of World War II. Through his journalism, Orwell articulated a consistent philosophy of political engagement, one that was deeply skeptical of unchecked power, whether from the right or the left. Orwell's journalistic work was marked by a commitment to truth, even when it was inconvenient or controversial. He was particularly critical of those intellectuals who, blinded by ideological allegiance, failed to speak out against the atrocities committed by Stalin's regime. Orwell's essays, such as Looking Back on the Spanish War, called out the betrayal of socialist ideals by the Soviet-backed communists in Spain and the role of intellectuals who supported Stalin's purges and repression. For Orwell, the fight against totalitarianism was not just about opposing fascism, but about ensuring that all forms of tyranny were exposed and resisted. In 1939, Orwell published one of his most important and impactful essays, Inside the Whale, in which he critiqued the state of English literature and its relationship to political engagement. Orwell argued that much of contemporary writing, particularly in England, had become detached from social issues and the realities of power. He lamented the fact that many writers seem more concerned with their own intellectual pursuits than with the struggles of the working class or the threats posed by fascism and totalitarianism. Orwell's critique was not only aimed at writers, but at the broader intellectual class that had failed to take a stand against rising authoritarianism. Orwell's work during these years was not just critical, but also deeply reflective. His experiences in Spain, his observations of Soviet oppression, and his disillusionment with political movements led him to develop a more nuanced understanding of power and its corrupting influence. As a writer, he began to explore the ways in which political ideologies could become tools for oppression rather than liberation. This theme would become central to his later works, particularly Animal Farm and 1984, where he would examine the mechanisms by which political regimes maintain control through manipulation and propaganda. Despite the turbulence of the times, Orwell's writing continued to resonate with readers who shared his concerns about the future of democracy and individual freedom. His unflinching approach to truth, even when it required him to challenge his own political beliefs, set him apart from other writers of his era. In the face of rising totalitarianism, Orwell's work became a beacon for those who sought to preserve liberty and resist oppression. By 1940, Orwell had emerged as one of the most important voices in English literature, known for his courage in addressing uncomfortable truths about power and politics. His work as a journalist and essayist during these years helped to solidify his reputation as a writer who refused to compromise on his commitment to social justice. Orwell's journalism was a testament to his belief that literature could, and should, serve as a powerful tool for social critique and change. Part 9. A Turning Point. World War II and the Birth of Animal Farm, 1940 to 1944. By 1940, George Orwell had become an increasingly important voice in British journalism and literature. But as the world plunged into the chaos of World War II, Orwell found himself at yet another pivotal moment in his career. The war had a profound effect on him, pushing him to further engage with political realities and reflect on the role of ideology in global conflict. His experiences during this period would lead to the creation of one of his most famous works, Animal Farm. During the early years of the war, Orwell was deeply concerned with the growing influence of totalitarian regimes, particularly the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin. Though Stalin's regime was nominally aligned with the Allies against Nazi Germany, Orwell viewed the Soviet Union as no less authoritarian than Hitler's fascist regime. He was troubled by the way many Western intellectuals overlooked or excused Stalin's brutal tactics, including purges, mass executions, and forced collectivization. Orwell's growing distrust of Stalinism during this period would eventually culminate in Animal Farm, an allegorical novella about the dangers of totalitarianism. In 1941, Orwell took a step toward direct engagement with the war effort by enlisting in the British Home Guard, a civilian defense force. His role was largely symbolic, but it gave him a renewed sense of purpose as he sought to contribute to the fight against fascism. At the same time, he began to feel increasingly alienated from the British government's wartime policies, which he saw as being driven by a pragmatic, opportunistic agenda rather than ideological purity. This sense of disillusionment with government power, particularly in the context of war, would inform much of his future work. In 1943, Orwell began to draft Animal Farm, which would become his most direct and biting critique of Stalinism. The story, set on a farm where the animals revolt against their human owner, was a clear allegory for the Russian Revolution and the subsequent rise of Stalin's totalitarian regime. The pigs on the farm, who initially champion equality and the idea of freedom, gradually become indistinguishable from the humans they overthrew, revealing Orwell's central message about the corrupting nature of power. Through Animal Farm, Orwell demonstrated that revolutionary ideals, when taken to extremes, could easily become tools of oppression rather than instruments of freedom. Though Orwell was still deeply invested in fighting fascism, his focus during this period shifted toward exposing the totalitarianism that existed within socialist and communist regimes. His experiences in Spain, as well as his growing awareness of Soviet atrocities, made him acutely aware of the dangers posed by unchecked power, regardless of political ideology. In Animal Farm, Orwell used satire and allegory to show how those in power can exploit revolution and manipulate the masses for their own gain. As Orwell began to shape Animal Farm, he also wrestled with the challenges of being a writer during wartime. Resources were limited, and the censorship imposed by the British government made it difficult for Orwell to express his views openly. Despite these challenges, he continued to write prolifically, contributing essays, articles, and reviews, and refining his ideas about politics, power, and the role of the writer in society. The process of writing Animal Farm was not an easy one for Orwell. He struggled with self-doubt and concerns about the book's potential to be misinterpreted or suppressed due to its direct critique of Stalinism. Despite these fears, Orwell pressed on, driven by his belief that the story needed to be told. After completing the manuscript, Orwell faced further difficulties in finding a publisher, as many were reluctant to publish a book that could alienate potential allies in the wartime effort. Eventually, Animal Farm was published in 1945 by Secker and Warburg, marking a breakthrough in Orwell's literary career. Upon its release, Animal Farm received immediate critical acclaim, with its sharp critique of Stalinism resonating powerfully with readers. The book became a bestseller and cemented Orwell's reputation as one of the leading critics of totalitarianism in the 20th century. It also marked a turning point in Orwell's career, as his engagement with political issues took on a more direct and personal tone. The success of Animal Farm allowed Orwell to continue his work as both a writer and an outspoken critic of totalitarianism, ensuring that his voice would remain central to the political debates of the post-war era. By 1944, Orwell's experiences during the war, combined with his disillusionment with Stalinism, had shaped him into a writer who viewed all forms of unchecked power with skepticism. Animal Farm would not be his final word on totalitarianism, but it marked a critical moment in his career, setting the stage for his most ambitious and influential work, 1984. Part 10, 1984 and the Dystopian Vision, 1945 to 1949. By the mid-1940s, George Orwell had firmly established himself as one of the most incisive and courageous voices in literature. The success of Animal Farm had solidified his reputation as a critic of totalitarianism, but Orwell was not content to stop there. With the world still reeling from the devastation of World War II and the looming tensions of the Cold War, Orwell turned his attention to crafting what would become his most enduring and influential work, 1984. Orwell began writing 1984 in 1947, at a time when his health was deteriorating rapidly due to tuberculosis. Despite his illness, Orwell was determined to complete the novel, driven by a sense of urgency to warn against the dangers of totalitarianism and unchecked government power. The novel was set in a dystopian future where a totalitarian regime, represented by the party and its leader, Big Brother, exerts complete control over every aspect of life. Through its use of surveillance, propaganda, and manipulation, the party suppresses individuality and enforces absolute conformity. The themes of 1984 were deeply influenced by Orwell's own experiences and observations. His time in the Spanish Civil War and his disillusionment with Stalinism had shown him how political movements could exploit ideology to oppress and manipulate. The rise of fascist and communist regimes during his lifetime further demonstrated the devastating consequences of totalitarian rule. These influences coalesced into the chilling world of 1984, where Orwell explored the mechanisms by which power corrupts and dehumanizes. The novel introduced several concepts and terms that have since become part of the cultural lexicon. Words like Big Brother, doublethink, and thought crime encapsulate Orwell's critique of totalitarian regimes and their ability to control not only actions but thoughts. Through the protagonist, Winston Smith, Orwell explored the psychological toll of living under constant surveillance and the struggle to maintain individuality in the face of oppressive power. Winston's rebellion against a party and his ultimate betrayal underscore the crushing inevitability of totalitarian control. One of the most striking elements of 1984 was its exploration of the role of language in shaping reality. The party's development of newspeak, a language designed to eliminate dissent by restricting thought, highlighted Orwell's concerns about the power of language to control and manipulate. This idea was rooted in Orwell's earlier essays, such as Politics and the English Language, where he argued that vague and euphemistic language was often used to obscure truth and justify oppression. Orwell's portrayal of a dystopian future was not meant to predict the future, but to serve as a warning. He was deeply concerned about the trajectory of a modern world, particularly the growing power of the state and the potential for technology to be used as a tool of control. The novel's depiction of a society where truth is constantly rewritten and history is manipulated was a stark reminder of the fragility of freedom and the importance of vigilance in protecting democratic values. Writing 1984 was an immense challenge for Orwell, both physically and emotionally. His health continued to decline during the writing process, and he spent much of his time in isolation on the remote island of Jura in Scotland. Despite these difficulties, Orwell poured his remaining energy into the novel, driven by his conviction that its message was critically important. When 1984 was published in 1949, it was met with widespread acclaim and quickly became a bestseller. Critics praised its chilling vision of the future and its incisive critique of totalitarianism. However, the novel also sparked controversy, with some accusing Orwell of promoting an overly pessimistic view of humanity and politics. Nonetheless, 1984 resonated with readers around the world, solidifying Orwell's legacy as one of the most important writers of the 20th century. The impact of 1984 extended far beyond its initial publication. Its themes of surveillance, propaganda, and the abuse of power remain deeply relevant, making it a touchstone for discussions about political freedom and human rights. The novel has been adapted into numerous films, plays, and other media, ensuring its continued influence on generations of readers. For Orwell, 1984 was the culmination of a lifetime spent grappling with questions of power, freedom, and truth. Though he would not live long enough to see the full impact of his work, Orwell's final masterpiece remains a powerful reminder of the dangers of totalitarianism and enduring importance of resistance against oppression. Part 11. Legacy Amidst Decline, 1949 to 1950. By 1949, George Orwell had reached the pinnacle of his literary career, yet his health was in irreversible decline. The publication of 1984 marked his crowning achievement as a writer, but the physical toll of tuberculosis, which he had battled for years, was becoming impossible to ignore. Despite his deteriorating condition, Orwell remained deeply engaged with his work and the growing impact of his writings on the global stage. The success of 1984 was both exhilarating and bittersweet for Orwell. The novel's chilling portrayal of a dystopian future struck a chord with readers worldwide, earning him widespread acclaim. It was hailed as a masterpiece of political literature, a work that captured the fears of the post-war world and served as a warning about the dangers of totalitarianism. However, Orwell's failing health meant that he could not fully enjoy the fruits of his labor. The long hours he had spent writing 1984, often under harsh conditions on the remote island of Jura, had left him physically and emotionally drained. Orwell spent much of 1949 in hospitals, receiving treatment for tuberculosis. He was admitted to a private sanatorium in Cranham, Gloucestershire, where he continued to write letters, engage with editors, and plan future projects. His correspondence during this time reveals a man who, despite his illness, remained intellectually vibrant and committed to his craft. Orwell expressed gratitude for the reception of 1984, but also expressed frustration at being unable to contribute more actively to public discourse. As Orwell's condition worsened, he married Sonia Brownell in October 1949 in a small hospital ceremony. Sonia, who was 15 years younger than Orwell and an editor at Horizon Literary Magazine, became his second wife and caretaker during his final months. Their marriage was both a personal and practical decision. Sonia provided Orwell with companionship and support, while Orwell hoped that Sonia would help manage his literary estate and protect his work after his death. Despite his declining health, Orwell remained concerned with the political issues of his time. He continued to critique the growing tensions of the early Cold War, particularly the ideological conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. Orwell feared that the world was heading toward a permanent state of division and mutual hostility, a theme he had explored in 1984 through the concept of perpetual war between superstates. His warnings about the dangers of propaganda, surveillance, and political manipulation seemed increasingly prescient in the context of emerging Cold War. Orwell's influence during this period extended beyond his published works. He was sought after by journalists, intellectuals, and political figures who recognized the power of his insights and the clarity of his moral vision. Although he was too ill to engage directly in public debates, his writings continued to shape conversations about freedom, democracy, and the role of the individual in resisting oppression. Orwell's voice became a touchstone for those seeking to navigate the complexities of the post-war world. In early 1950, Orwell's condition took a turn for the worse. He was transferred to University College Hospital in London, where he spent his final weeks under intensive care. Despite the best efforts of his doctors, Orwell succumbed to tuberculosis on January 21, 1950, at the age of 46, His death marked the end of a remarkable journey, one that had taken him from the colonial outposts of Burma to the battlefields of Spain, and finally to the forefront of global literature and political thought. Orwell's passing was met with an outpouring of tributes from writers, critics, and political figures. His contributions to literature and his unwavering commitment to truth and justice were widely recognized as unparalleled. In the decades following his death, Orwell's work continued to inspire readers and thinkers around the world, cementing his status as one of the most important writers of the 20th century. Though Orwell's life was cut tragically short, his legacy endured. His insights into the nature of power, the dangers of totalitarianism, and the importance of individual freedom remain deeply relevant. Through works like 1984 and Animal Farm, Orwell left an indelible mark on literature and politics, ensuring that his voice would continue to resonate long after his death. Part 12. Posthumous Legacy and Global Influence. After George Orwell's death in 1950, his influence only grew stronger. His works, particularly Animal Farm in 1984, transcended their historical context to become enduring symbols of the fight against oppression and the defense of individual freedom. Orwell's voice, though silenced in life, echoed through the decades as his writings gained renewed relevance in an ever-changing world. 1984, with its vivid portrayal of a dystopian society dominated by surveillance, propaganda, and authoritarian control, became a cultural touchstone. Terms like Big Brother, thought crime, and doublethink entered the global lexicon, providing a framework for discussing government overreach and the manipulation of truth. The novel's depiction of a totalitarian regime resonated deeply during the Cold War, as tensions between the capitalist West and the communist East reached their peak. For readers in both democratic and authoritarian societies, 1984 served as a warning about the fragility of freedom and the dangers of unchecked power. Similarly, Animal Farm found a wide audience across the globe, with its allegorical critique of Stalinism appealing to readers from diverse political backgrounds. The novella became required reading in schools, a staple of political literature, and a rallying cry for those seeking to expose the abuses of authoritarian regimes. In countries under oppressive rule, clandestine copies of Animal Farm circulated as acts of resistance. Its clear and accessible style made its message easy to grasp, allowing it to reach readers of all ages and educational levels. Orwell's essays, reviews, and journalism also gained renewed appreciation in the years following his death. His ability to dissect complex political issues and present them with clarity and moral conviction made his work timeless. Essays like Politics and the English Language and The Lion and the Unicorn continued to be studied for their insights into the intersection of language, power, and cultural identity. Orwell's commitment to intellectual honesty and his willingness to challenge ideological orthodoxy made him a figure who transcended partisan divides. The rise of the information age and advancements in technology brought Orwell's warnings about surveillance and control into sharper focus. As governments and corporations gained unprecedented access to personal data, the themes of 1984 took on new dimensions. Orwell's prescient vision of a world where privacy is eroded and truth is manipulated resonated strongly in an era of mass data collection and disinformation campaigns. Scholars and commentators frequently cited Orwell when discussing the ethical implications of emerging technologies, cementing his status as a prophet of modernity. Orwell's influence extended beyond literature and political theory into art, film, and popular culture. 1984 was adapted into several films, stage productions, and even radio dramas, each interpreting its themes for new audiences. Musicians, visual artists, and writers drew inspiration from Orwell's work, using his ideas as a lens through which to examine contemporary issues. His name became shorthand for critiques of authoritarianism, with phrases like Orwellian serving as a potent descriptor of oppressive systems and policies. In academia, Orwell's works became a cornerstone of studies on totalitarianism, propaganda, and the role of the writer in society. His life and writings were the subject of countless biographies, analyses, and retrospectives, each exploring different facets of his legacy. Orwell's insistence on the importance of objective truth and his rejection of ideological dogma made his work particularly relevant in the postmodern era, where debates about truth and relativism became central to intellectual discourse. Orwell's posthumous impact was not limited to the Western world. His works were translated into dozens of languages and distributed widely, reaching readers in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and beyond. In countries transitioning from colonial rule to independence, Orwell's critique of power and his defense of human dignity found eager audiences. Activists and intellectuals across the globe cited Orwell as an inspiration, using his insights to navigate the challenges of building democratic societies. Despite his untimely death, Orwell's enduring relevance is a testament to the universality of his ideas. His writings continue to be read, debated, and celebrated, serving as a reminder of the importance of vigilance, empathy, and the unrelenting pursuit of truth. As new generations confront their own challenges, Orwell's voice remains a guiding force, urging them to resist oppression, defend freedom, and question authority. Part 13. Orwell's enduring relevance in the digital age. As the world entered the digital age, George Orwell's insights into surveillance, control, and the manipulation of truth took on an entirely new significance. The rise of the internet, social media, and advanced technologies created opportunities for unprecedented connection and innovation, but also raised urgent questions about privacy, freedom, and power. In this rapidly evolving landscape, Orwell's works, particularly 1984, emerged as more relevant than ever. The concept of Big Brother gained renewed importance with the proliferation of surveillance technologies. Governments and corporations began employing advanced tools to monitor and collect data on individuals, often with little transparency or accountability. Orwell's warnings about the dangers of mass surveillance seemed prophetic as debates intensified over the ethical implications of these practices. From CCTV cameras in public spaces to the widespread use of online tracking, the parallels to Orwell's vision of constant oversight became difficult to ignore. One of the most striking aspects of Orwell's relevance in the digital age was his exploration of the manipulation of truth and information. In 1984, the party's control of history and facts through the Ministry of Truth illustrated the dangers of propaganda and censorship. This theme resonated strongly in an era marked by the spread of fake news, disinformation, and algorithm-driven content. Social media platforms, while empowering individuals to share information, also became breeding grounds for echo chambers and the distortion of reality. Orwell's insights offered a framework for understanding these challenges and highlighted the importance of critical thinking and media literacy. The rise of authoritarianism and populism in the 21st century further underscored the relevance of Orwell's work. Leaders in various parts of the world used propaganda, nationalism, and divisive rhetoric to consolidate power and suppress dissent. Orwell's critique of totalitarian systems provided invaluable lessons for those seeking to resist these trends and defend democratic values. Activists, journalists, and citizens turned to Orwell's writings for inspiration, finding in his works a reminder of the importance of vigilance and the power of individual agency. In addition to surveillance and propaganda, Orwell's exploration of the relationship between language and power became increasingly pertinent. His concept of newspeak, a language designed to limit thought and control behavior, resonated in an era where political and corporate language was often used to obscure meaning and manipulate perception. Euphemisms, jargon, and doublespeak in political discourse and advertising mirrored Orwell's concerns, reinforcing the need for clarity and honesty in communication. Orwell's relevance in the digital age was not limited to criticism of authoritarianism. His commitment to truth, his skepticism of ideologies, and his empathy for the oppressed offered valuable guidance for navigating the complexities of modern life. In a world where information overload and ideological polarization threatened to overwhelm reason and compassion, Orwell's voice served as a beacon of integrity and humanity. Educational institutions embraced Orwell's works as essential reading for students grappling with the challenges of the digital era. Courses on media studies, political science, and ethics frequently included 1984 and Animal Farm as key texts, highlighting their enduring relevance. Scholars and educators emphasized the importance of Orwell's insights in fostering critical thinking, civic engagement, and a deeper understanding of the forces shaping the modern world. Orwell's influence also extended to popular culture. where his ideas continued to inspire creators in film, television, literature, and art. Dystopian narratives drawing from Orwellian themes explored the implications of technological advances and the erosion of privacy. From science fiction films to speculative novels, these works carried forward Orwell's legacy by imagining the future through the lens of his warnings. Perhaps most importantly, Orwell's enduring relevance lay in his unwavering belief in the power of the individual to make a difference. His insistence on the importance of personal responsibility and moral courage resonated in a world where systemic challenges often seemed insurmountable. Orwell's example encouraged readers to speak truth to power, challenge injustice, and uphold the values of freedom and dignity. As society continued to grapple with the implications of the digital revolution, Orwell's insights served as a powerful reminder of the need for balance between progress and ethics. His works remained a touchstone for those seeking to understand and navigate the complexities of the modern world, ensuring that his voice would continue to inspire generations to come. Part 14. Orwell in Modern Political Discourse. George Orwell's impact on modern political discourse is profound, shaping the way individuals, academics, and leaders discuss power, truth, and freedom. His works, particularly 1984 and Animal Farm, serve as enduring references for those critiquing authoritarianism, propaganda, and systemic corruption. In the 21st century, Orwell's name became synonymous with the struggle to protect democratic ideals in the face of growing political and societal challenges. The term Orwellian emerged as a powerful descriptor for policies, systems, or practices that erode individual freedoms and distort reality. Whether discussing mass surveillance programs, political spin, or the suppression of dissent, critics frequently invoked Orwell's vision to illustrate the potential dangers of such actions. Governments accused of using propaganda or restricting freedoms were likened to Orwell's dystopian regimes, forcing them to confront the moral implications of their policies. Orwell's exploration of language as a tool of control continues to resonate deeply in political discourse. His concept of newspeak, a language designed to limit thought and expression, finds parallels in the euphemistic language of modern politics. Terms like collateral damage, enhanced interrogation, or alternative facts illustrate how language can obscure harsh realities and manipulate public perception. Orwell's writings remind readers to question the language of power and to demand clarity and honesty from leaders. The rise of authoritarianism and populism in various parts of the world has further highlighted Orwell's relevance. Leaders employing propaganda, promoting nationalism, or suppressing opposition often face comparisons to the regimes depicted in Orwell's works. Activists and political commentators use Orwellian references to critique such tactics and to advocate for transparency, accountability, and the preservation of democratic institutions. Orwell's insights into the psychology of power provide a valuable framework for understanding these dynamics and resisting their encroachment. Orwell's influence extends beyond criticism of authoritarianism to broader debates about the role of truth in politics. His emphasis on the importance of objective truth as a foundation for free societies resonates strongly in an era of misinformation and post-truth politics. The deliberate spread of false information, the rewriting of history, and the manipulation of public opinion are issues that Orwell anticipated with remarkable clarity. His works serve as a call to action for journalists, educators, and citizens to defend the integrity of truth in the public sphere. Educational institutions and advocacy organizations continue to draw on Orwell's ideas to promote civic engagement and critical thinking. Workshops, lectures, and campaigns often use Orwell's works to encourage individuals to recognize and challenge propaganda, disinformation, and unjust policies. His writings have become essential tools for fostering an informed and active citizenry, capable of holding leaders accountable and safeguarding democratic values. Orwell's works have also influenced debates about the ethical use of technology in governance and public life. His warnings about surveillance and control resonate in discussions about privacy, data security, and the use of artificial intelligence. Activists and policymakers frequently cite Orwell when addressing the balance between technological innovation and individual rights. His writings remind society of the need to prioritize human dignity and freedom over efficiency and control. In popular culture, Orwell's themes remain a potent source of inspiration for creators exploring political and social issues. Films, novels, and television series often draw on Orwellian motifs to critique contemporary power structures and imagine alternative futures. These works ensure that Orwell's vision continues to influence and inspire audiences in new and meaningful ways. Despite the challenges of modern politics, Orwell's writings offer a sense of hope and purpose. His belief in the resilience of the human spirit and the power of individuals to effect change resonates strongly in movements for social justice and political reform. Orwell's example encourages readers to remain vigilant, to question authority, and to stand firm in the face of oppression. Orwell's presence in political discourse is a testament to the universality and timelessness of his ideas. His works continue to challenge and inspire, reminding society of the importance of protecting truth, freedom, and dignity. In a world where political challenges often seem overwhelming, Orwell's voice remains a guiding force, urging humanity to strive for a better and more just future. Part 15. Orwell's Legacy in Literature and Beyond. George Orwell's legacy extends far beyond his impact on politics and society, permeating the world of literature, art, and culture. His distinctive voice, shaped by his experiences, convictions, and unyielding commitment to truth, has left an indelible mark on writers, thinkers, and creators around the globe. Orwell's works continue to inspire new generations, offering a timeless exploration of human nature, power, and the pursuit of freedom. Orwell's influence on literature is evident in the countless authors who have drawn inspiration from his style, themes, and moral clarity. His ability to merge narrative and political critique in works like Animal Farm and 1984 set a new standard for political fiction. Writers exploring dystopian themes, totalitarian regimes, or the complexities of human psychology often cite Orwell as a foundational influence. His works have inspired literary movements and individual masterpieces, ensuring that his vision remains a cornerstone of modern storytelling. In addition to his novels, Orwell's essays have become a benchmark for clarity and conviction in non-fiction writing. His works, such as Why I Write in Politics and the English Language, are studied for their insights into the craft of writing and the responsibilities of the writer. Orwell's insistence on plain language and his disdain for jargon and obfuscation have influenced generations of essayists and journalists. His essays demonstrate the power of language to illuminate, persuade, and provoke thought, making them essential reading for anyone engaged in public discourse. Orwell's exploration of truth, propaganda, and human rights has also left a profound impact on the field of journalism. His experiences as a reporter, whether covering the Spanish Civil War or documenting the lives of the working class, underscored his commitment to bearing witness and telling uncomfortable truths. This legacy has inspired investigative journalists and war correspondents who seek to expose injustice and give voice to the voiceless. Orwell's principles of honesty, integrity, and independence continue to guide the best practices in the profession. In popular culture, Orwell's influence can be seen in numerous adaptations, reinterpretations, and homages. Films like 1984, and animated versions of Animal Farm have brought his stories to new audiences, exploring their themes in cinematic form. Music, theater, and visual arts have also drawn on Orwellian themes, using his ideas to critique contemporary society and imagine alternative futures. These adaptations ensure that Orwell's work remains dynamic and relevant, resonating with audiences across diverse mediums and contexts. Beyond literature and the arts, Orwell's legacy is evident in the broader cultural lexicon. Terms like Big Brother, Orwellian, and doublethink have become part of everyday language, shaping how people discuss issues of power, control, and truth. These phrases reflect Orwell's enduring ability to frame complex ideas in a way that is accessible and impactful. His language has transcended its original context, becoming tools for critique and analysis in a wide range of fields. Orwell's legacy also lies in his unwavering belief in the capacity of individuals to resist oppression and fight for a better world. His portrayal of flawed but determined protagonists, whether in fiction or in his own life, serves as a source of inspiration for readers facing challenges in their own lives. Orwell's works remind us that the struggle for truth, freedom, and justice is both universal and deeply personal. Educational institutions worldwide continue to teach Orwell's works, ensuring that his ideas remain alive in the minds of students. His novels and essays are staples of curricula in literature, history, and political science, sparking debates about ethics, power, and the role of the individual in society. Through these discussions, new generations are introduced to Orwell's vision, fostering critical thinking and a deeper appreciation for the values he championed. Ultimately, Orwell's legacy is one of hope and humanity. Despite his often bleak portrayals of oppression and suffering, his works are rooted in a profound belief in the potential for human dignity and resilience. Orwell's example encourages readers to confront difficult truths, challenge injustice, and imagine a better future, ensuring that his voice will continue to inspire and guide for generations to come. Thanks for tuning in to Historical Legacies. If you enjoyed this dive into history, please like, subscribe, and share. Join us next time for more fascinating stories from the past.